that guy was incredible. And if we're going with the eye test, maybe he was better than my number one.
Yo, this is Trav with Trav Sports Bag. You know where we're at right now. We're about to talk a little bit of sports. We're back in the boxing game today. And as you see, I have my guest Bias. You remember him from the Spence and Bud conversation just a couple of days ago. He's back. And this time we're letting you know who the 5 greatest Mexican boxers of all time, who they are, what they are, and we are going to give you our opinion. You can put what you want in the comments. I'm sure yours may differ, but we can agree to disagree if nothing else at all. But before we do any of that, let's take care of this YouTube stuff, this algorithm. Since we're in the boxing game, we got to battle this algorithm as well. And that means you have to subscribe to the channel. Give us the thumbs up. Make sure you hit the alarm bell so it makes sure you get every time we drop. See, we're not just dropping boxing all the time. We have other sports as well. So just in case you want to check those out, go to our playlist. But without any further ado, Mexican boxing is on the menu, the greatest of all time. Bias, who do you start with? We're going from 5 to 1. You let me know.
All right, starting with 5. It's real close. I got to give a shout out to Baby Arizmendi. He has a victory over Hammer and Hank. You know, so you can't beat just anybody and beat one of the top 3, top 4 fighters of all time. But I had to go with Carlos Zarate. You know, he had a long winning streak. He's considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest bantamweight of all time. So that gives him the edge at bantamweight for me.
Well, you know, I'm going to start with number 5. And my number 5 is going to be Juan Marquez. Of course, I think one of our modern guys who we've recently seen, he's just recently retired, relatively speaking. And I think he deserved to be in the list. He has a body of work that proves that much. What had made him great, he was an excellent counterpuncher. But of course, you just can't get away with being an excellent counterpuncher. You have to have other things. And those other things are, well, early on, he fought Agapito Sanchez. Agapito Sanchez was the Dominican kid who beat Manny Pacquiao. In fact, he didn't beat him. He got a draw out of it, blooded him up. I remember that on HBO. It was a mess. But if you look at his resume, anyone who was anyone during the time he came up was part of his resume. Joe Casamoya, Juan Diaz. We see Manny Pacquiao, who he fought 4 times, and he lullabied him in the last one. And you know what? Arguably, he probably won all of them. Probably with the exception of the one, if you really have the argument, the first fight they had, you know, he went down a couple of times, he was behind, but still got a draw out of it. That should let you know what he did in between time getting to the 12th round. So he's one of the reasons why, those are the reasons why I have him up there. Yeah, he took care of Floyd, he fought Floyd and was easily beaten, was even knocked down, but that was a catch weight fight. He's not 144 pounds, at least he wasn't at the time. And then of course, he did fight Tim Bradley in a surprising fight for me. He lost to Tim Bradley, but Tim Bradley fought that excellent kind of fight. Kind of sort of what Floyd did. He was the counterpuncher that day. And Carl, don't forget about it. He wanted the catch weight at 155. It wasn't going to happen. But Juan Marquez is my guy.
Definitely a great fighter. Involved in some great fights, a lot of action fights. I can't knock that pick.
So who's your number 4?
I'm going to go with Ruben Olivares. Again, a lot of respect out there. Here's the thing about those guys. He's a little bit before my time. And so, you know, watching highlights on YouTube, you can make a highlight of almost anybody and make them look like the GOAT. So you got to be careful with those YouTube highlight videos. But again, another highly respected boxer was, I believe, voted by Ring Magazine as one of the top 2 bantamweights of all time. So I'm going with Ruben on my 4th.
Yeah, that's not a bad choice. He's actually on my list too. I just hadn't gotten to him yet. But who I did get to is my number 4, and that is Carlos Zarate. why would Carlos Zarate be there? Well, he should be on everyone's list. I mean, you can have a list of the top 5 and they could literally be interchangeable. There are probably just 2 guys that you can probably, one way or another, just have 1 or 2 unanimously across the board. But the top 5, it can just be mixed around like a bowl of soup. But Carlos Zarate, 70 wins, and he had 63 KOs during those wins. You're talking about hard-punching Mexican fighters. Bro, the term Mexican-style fighting, it became a thing just recently in the past 15, 20 years. But when you look at the style these guys use, no one else uses it. You know why? Because no one else can. Because it relies on more than just boxing ability. You got to have some cojones. You got to have a lot of heart. And these guys show it. Right. Carlos Zarate was not short on that. You know, when he fought Rafael Gomez, he moved up.
The highest KO percentage in history.
Absolutely. But look at this. He came into that fight 52-0 with 51 knockouts. I didn't see him wearing a TBE hat. What the hell happened? He was undefeated. He had 52
He should have called his day.
He didn't have any losses. He was past Marciano's 49-0. There should have been a reason for that, but we let you know today, marketing is the reason why it went down. Gomez, as you said, was undefeated as well, had knockouts, 21-0 at the time, 21 KOs, and we saw how that ended, a 5th round KO. And so, you know, he's on my list for that. But he fought Castillo 3 times, fought Bobby Chacon. He was 2-1 against Bobby Chacon. He fought some of the hardest punching SOBs ever. Jose Luis Ramirez is another one of the guys he fought. That I believe Jose Luis Ramirez should at least get some type of credit or some announcement as a possible Hall of Famer. Look at the guy's record. It isn't just wins and losses. He beat quality fighters. He gave a lot of other quality fighters problems. He was really never a gatekeeper. But then we know how Zarate's career ended. You know, Daniel Zaragoza, you know, went in there and Pop goes the Weasel. So when Pop goes the Weasel, we ask you, who's your next one up for bid, number 3?
Well, before I get to number 3, let me explain why I have Oliveras ahead of Zarate.
Okay.
Zarate, he was unsuccessful when he moved up. Oliveras, he did get a super bantamweight title.
Yes.
So, no, that means something. So that's why he gets the edge over Zarate.
Oh, yeah. You know, and like I was saying earlier, man, these guys are so interchangeable. You just can't, especially after you get to the first 2, which I think anyone who knows any type of Mexican boxing, in fact, any boxing at all, those 1 and 2, those 2 guys are interchangeable. But outside of those, that bottom 3 to 5, 5 to 3, you could just throw them in a hat, pull them out, and you wouldn't be wrong either way you did it. So, number 3.
So number 3, I think this is where you're going to disagree with me, but I like El Finito Lopez, Ricardo Lopez. You know, watching that guy box, it was a thing of beauty. You know, his footwork, his 1-2, and then he countered the counters coming his way. I mean, that guy, if you want to create a boxer, that he could be the guy you wanted to create. It's just unfortunate there wasn't a lot of big names, big fights for him out there. So I don't think he gets the recognition or respect from a lot of people for that reason. But he passes the eye test for me. You're watching a guy who knows what he's doing in that ring.
When you're talking about Mexican fighters, period, I mean, and when you're talking about the best of the best, you can almost not be wrong, because all of those guys had not only talent, they had the heart, they had everything you wanted. And with Finito, like you said, everything. If you wanted to learn boxing, this is the guy that could write the book and do every move and every technique in the boxing game correctly. And then he had those intangibles like toughness and heart and endurance and all of these things that made him who he was. You know, he's not on my top 5, but he definitely would be a 6, 7, or 8, certainly. He has to be in someone's top 10. And when you're that height or when you're that size, you're going to run into a lot of fighters who throw about 1,000+ punches every 12 rounds if you get there. And if you don't get there, they're still throwing 1,000+ punches in probably 10 rounds. So there's something to be said about that. No knock against Finito. If I could have, I would have, but this time I didn't. Give me a top 10 list and he'll be there all the time. And for me, as you know, my number 3 was Ruben Oliveras. You know, Ruben Oliveras, 79 KOs in 105 fights. It's again, where the hell are these Mexican fighters getting this power from? They're breaking their hands while they're breaking people's faces, and they fight again. I mean, he was so
3 months later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Not 6 months later, not a year later. Not getting a 6-year contract to fight and fighting over 6 years. Well, once a year. These guys went and fought hard. They trained hard. They might have did their little part of it, but when it was time to fight, they freaking fought. And Ruben Alvarez was one of those guys who came to fight. I mean, 51-0-1. Here's another one of that club. 51-0-1. He had the same, at that point in his career, as Finito in his entire career. So there's a reason why he's up there. I mean, you just look at the guys that he fought. I mean, it's ridiculous how, and by the way, I did make a little bit of a mistake and I want to correct it right now. Carlos Zarate fought Jeff Finnick and Daniel Zaragoza. It was Ruben Alvarez who fought Castillo 3 times and Bobby Chacon and went 2-1 against him. And Jose Luis Ramirez and Daniel Little Red Lopez, another. Hard, man, I couldn't fight with you.
Tough
bunch of freaking headaches, man. Danny Little Red Lopez didn't make the list, but he's knocking everybody out just as well. So
you could say he came up at the wrong time. 8 years later, maybe he runs the whole division.
8 years later, he does run it. He came along at a time. It was like being a fighter in the early 70s, and you called yourself a heavyweight. You had no chance if you weren't one of the greatest of all time. I mean, between Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, just great fighters, and other fighters who would have been great if they were there. But back to Ruben Alvarez, that's crazy how his entire career. I mean, he just knocking guys out. His win percentage. Come on, man. I don't even know what to say. Who's doing that? Come on, man. He's putting guys to sleep. I'm not going to sleep on this, but he's putting guys to sleep, man. We got to move up with this chart. Let's go up.
All right. Real quick, though, I wanted to mention, getting back to Finito Lopez. On a message board or somewhere, I don't know, someone said his resume was questionable and he's never been tested. And I replied, he got dropped, got back up, fought to a draw, came back, won the rematch. How is that not being tested? I never got a reply.
You know what? I think if you're going to rely on social media in any capacity for some real definitive answers, unless you know the people in the group are serious boxing fans, outside of that, I just can't take it serious because, I mean, these are the same people who complain and they want just people standing in front of each other like Neanderthals and just beating each other up with no science involved. See, you can be what you can call a brawler like Roberto Duran, and you could fight balls to the wall and look like a brawler, but be one of the most technically sound fighters while you're doing it, which Duran was. You know what I mean? And Finito is a lot like that. He did the same thing. He was an overwhelming fighter, but he kept his calm and he whooped on some butt for a long time. He had not lost a fight. A draw is a draw. He comes back, gets a rematch, and he does what great champions do. In rematches, they win them. And a lot of times, a lot more decisively. So let's move on before this blasphemy continues. Unbelievable, man.
So number 2, as you mentioned, 1 and 2 can be interchangeable. Mm-hmm. Depends who my opinion might change next week. Who knows? But unfortunately, Salvador Sanchez, he was in that terrible car accident that took his life. So, his boxing career was cut short. But what we saw was incredible. His movement, his footwork, he could do a shoulder roll left-handed, even though he was orthodox fighter. I mean, that guy was incredible. And if we're going with the eye test, maybe he was better than my number 1. But we don't know if he could have gone up another weight class, another 2 weight classes. So for that reason, he's number 2. But on this list, being number 2 is no disrespect.
You know what? Being number 2 on this particular list, though, once again, I'm not jumping on the bandwagon. I've been on the bandwagon. Mexican style fighting is different. They call it Mexican style fighting for a reason because it's different from what we're used to seeing. These dudes will talk a good game. In fact, they wouldn't talk at all. They'll get to the fight and they'll show you putting on some of the best fights you've probably ever seen. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then the rivalry between Puerto Rico and Mexico, that adds a little bit more luster, a little bit more feisty. In fact, a lot more feisty. And we've seen that throughout history as well. And my number 2 is your number 2. We're thinking together on this one. Cerebral harmony on this one. But we can't be wrong either way you look at it. And I think anyone who doesn't have him in 1 or 2 It's just not a boxing fan. They're just trying to be different. And Salvador Sanchez, he died at 23 years old, a young buck, but what he did in that short time being a professional boxer, beating the crap out of anyone and everything that came his way. Yeah, he had one loss. Yes, he had one draw. But when it was said and done, when he became an older fighter, and in his case, around the 20s, he was unbeatable. And he was
just entering his prime.
Entering his prime. So he's whooping all these people up before his prime. And so what he's doing right now, and I know a lot of this is projection, what would have been, could have been, should have been. But if you've seen him fight other than hearing the stories, you know what you're dealing with. You know, Mexican style boxing, I said it so many times in here already, but this is one Mexican fighter that I hear other people saying, yo, he fights like a black dude. Come on. He fought like a black dude, and when he had to, he brought it down to Mexico and finished the deal. I mean, being so young, he was a great counterpuncher, excellent counterpuncher. He had radar. I mean, you know, Wilfredo Benitez get that radar thing going on. No, he had radar for real. And he fought big-time fighters, hard punchers like I just mentioned. Little Red Lopez beat him up. Ruben Castillo beat him up. I mean, Juan Laporte. And in fact, he was coming back in the rematch to fight Laporte before the accident. So that rematch was on the Brute too. And there was talk about him fighting Alexis Arguello, but Alexis Arguello as talent, and he was going to move up. That would have been his moving up fight from featherweight to lightweight, junior lightweight 130. Well, Alexis Arguello moved up to fight at the junior welterweight class. You know, ultimately he ended up fighting Aaron Pryor along the way. But Salvador Sanchez, the names go on. His battle with Rafael Gomez will always live in terms of just the way these two guys just who they were when they fought each other, and he finished him off. I mean, it was Gomez moving up this time. You know what I mean? Because in the other fight, you know, Carlos Zarate
moved up to him.
Exactly. So we saw how that went down. And
he got a young Azuma Nelson.
The Azuma Nelson fight. See, that's the one thing I kind of look at. See, people look at Azuma Nelson as the finished product. We remember him as fighting Jeff Finnegan, fighting Pernell Whitaker, even in a loss. And we look at him as the professor. He was 13-0 going into that fight.
Not the professor yet.
Yeah, exactly. He was still in school. And then I think Salvador Sanchez gave him a little bit more tutelage and a little bit more seasoning, kicked him out of there. It took him 15 rounds to do it, but that was his last fight. That was his last win, and it all ended right there with Salvador Sanchez. Therefore, we have to move on to our final and our number one. And if you don't know, just turn it off right now, because everyone should know who's the greatest Mexican, at least in our opinion right now. It can change. Time is still going on.
Definitely. We're in agreement. Julio Cesar Chavez. I mean, he won belts in 3 divisions, fought everybody, started his career 89-0, had some incredible knockouts. I think his peak performance was probably against Rosario. I mean, he just dominated that fight, and Rosario was a tough, hard puncher.
Absolutely.
And Chavez just broke him down surgically. And, you know, for him to come back against Taylor the way he did, you know, Taylor had super fast hands, and Chavez showed that speed doesn't always kill. You know, what beats speed? Timing. Chavez had the timing.
Absolutely.
Eventually, he broke him down. Chavez, I don't think he gets enough credit for his boxing ability. You know, a lot of times he would catch the jab with his left hand, or he's bob and weave underneath hooks and right hands. People think he was just like an Arturo Gatti type, but he wasn't. He was far from that.
I mean, you can't put those two in the same breath. I mean, what Chavez did, and I like to go back to what you were talking about, the Meldrick Taylor fight. Against Meldrick Taylor, I mean, I watched that fight. Meldrick Taylor fought as beautiful a boxing clinic as you could possibly put on, and Chavez hung in there. And I remember the desperation in his corner. Do it for your family, do it for your children. And you felt that title slipping away. And guess what he did? He did what champions do. He freaking closed the show in the most grand fashion in which you can possibly do it. Blame Richard Steele all you want, but guess who put Richard Steele into position to even be there to ask him if he's okay? Chavez puts Meldrick Taylor down with a shot that just took the life out of him. It was only a testament to Meldrick Taylor's heart that he was able to get up and even look at the ref before looking at Luduva in the ring, which should have been a disqualification anyway. But nevertheless, he just took the life out of him when he needed to do it. Now, the Pernell Whitaker fight, we could talk about all of that and how it was a robbery. Hey, it happens in boxing. That's just what happened. But all of these other fights, El Chapo, all these great names he had, they talked about fighting cab drivers. And I found out, Greg Halton found out that cab drivers in Mexico are pretty damn tough. So, I mean, Chavez obviously up there on the Mount Rushmore of Mexican boxing. I think he's the leader of the Mount Rushmore of Mexican boxing. And there's not going to be a change for some time to come. And now that we have our top boxers completed, I'll throw this question at you. Canelo's still fighting. Where does he finish up? Or does he have more to do to fall on that list? I left him off particularly because he's still active and he's still relatively in his prime, probably at the back end of his prime. But he can enter that list. Do you agree?
He can enter it, but he's got to fight the tough fights. You know, to me, he's been looking good against questionable opposition, if you ask me. You can look fast and quick against slow fighters, and that's who he's been fighting. You know, and there's some fighters out there, people calling them out, and now he's saying they need to fight each other, and then I'll fight the winner. Why?
You know what? He's fought some fighters that have names, and he's knocked them out. You know, he fought Kovalev. He went up there and fought him and beat him. And I know people are going to argue about that as well. But he's fought fighters and named fighters. He's fought Triple G twice. Now, what the judges did or what management or De La Hoya might have done has nothing to do with the fact that he got in the ring and put on 2 spectacular fights. And people are acting as if like he hasn't fought anybody. He fought Triple G twice, and he's looking to fight him a 3rd time. And now they're going to say, well, he's old now. Guess what? You were saying the same thing when he fought him the 1st and 2nd time.
He was old then, though.
You know what? If you want to say he was old then, why do we want a 3rd fight against an old man?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, they want one. I'm already satisfied. You know what I mean? I banked on that 2nd fight. So I don't want to.
I mean, he made him wait for a reason. He made him wait for a reason for him to get older.
You know what?
And now he's going to fight him even when he's 3-4 years older than the last time? Come on, man.
It happens in boxing. You know, Floyd Mayweather made Manny Pacquiao wait 6 to 7 years. In my opinion, Floyd beats any version of Manny Pacquiao, but it's not for me to believe. He has to go in the ring and believe that. And apparently he didn't until he finally did. There was enough wear and tear. He believed. He went in there and won a relatively easy fight, and that was that. And as you say, that was this. Thanks for joining Trav along with Bias on Yo Trav Sports Bag. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this. Go to our comments. Leave some comments down there. I know our top 5 can't be your top 5. And I'm sure Finito may be on your top 5 as well. So let us know. Peace.